Hello, hello. Welcome back to the In Step with God podcast. I know I've been away for a little bit longer than usual. I've just started up my final semester at Southern Methodist University, and there's just a lot going on as I'm preparing to graduate and getting ready to start this next chapter of my education at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. Super excited to finally get over there in the spring, but that is not why we're here. We're here to jump back into fault lines. We're looking at chapter 7, The Ground is Moving. We're almost to the end, guys. There's just a little bit more. This chapter doesn't really... It doesn't have a whole lot of academic stuff to it this time around. So it's going to be another shorter video, which I know you guys are probably a little bit thankful for. I know it can get a little bit long listening to the hour-long videos. But without a further ado, this is Voddie Baucham's Fault Lines, Chapter 7, The Ground is Moving. So the first thing that I want to point out is our first real critical piece comes from page 132. This is a very good thing. I was very happy for it. Very, very good to see. We are right to pursue justice, peace, and unity. Now, then, last time we talked about justice, there have been times where he doesn't give immediate citations. This time he did. He gives us 4 verses that all have good supporting context. This is just phenomenally well grounded and well given. He then continues, that is not the fault line. The fault lies in believing that such a vision can be attained by affiliating with, using the terminology of, or doing anything other than opposing in the most forceful terms the ideology that lies at the root of the social justice movement. And so he makes a note here. This is something that I wish he did more often. He very rarely makes a note like he does here where he mentions that, hey, I know I'm contrasting these two things or I'm talking about certain ideas. I'll break them down in later chapters. He doesn't always include those kinds of notes. He does it every now and then, but I wish it was a little bit more consistent. And if you guys are interested, I'll go through and mark it up and I'll mark the locations where maybe that could have been added. It's not really something that I've paid attention to in this run through of the academic analysis because it's all within the book. So it's not something that I was really paying attention to a whole lot. But if you guys want me to, I will be more than happy to do some additional analysis for you. So with that being said, one thing that he gets into that I'm really, really glad to see him addressing, this is something that you've heard Dr. Voth and I talk about if you've listened to the rhetoric episodes, but on page 133, Voddie makes the following. One of the negative results of this is no longer being able to deal with ideas without attacking the people who hold them. Disagreements quickly deteriorate into arguments and worse. This is something that is incredibly powerful, incredibly important to understand, is that it is very difficult for us to debate ideas today. It is, and this is something that I struggle with. I struggle with people disagreeing with me. I have a hard time with being disagreed with. That is something that I struggle with personally, because I tend to take it as a disagreement, not with what I'm saying, but with kind of like who I'm feeling called to be. And that's not what's happening, but I'm struggling to get out of this mindset. So I was just super thankful to see that this is something that Voddie is challenging more explicitly. So one of the things that he notes here is a consequence of that is that whenever we take a position on an issue, it carries the idea that not only do we disagree with those, not only are we opposed to the view, but to all who hold it. So now, as a result, we're never debating ideas. We're just debating it's personal attacks. It is all argumentation. So anyway, it's a mess, and he talks about some of it. Then there was something called the Dallas Statement. This is very well put together. Nothing really out of alignment here academically. Some of it might have leaned on some of it might be taken as him trying to make no, I'm not going to go there. Some of this is very well put together, and other pieces of it aren't, but they're not really academic issues. They're more stylistic choices that I disagree with, and so I'm not going to get into it. And so one thing that I do think is really interesting, and I'm really thankful that Voddie points this out. So the Dallas Statement was a lot of conservative evangelical pastors coming together and basically signing a statement that says, hey, we have issues with CRT, and we want to be having more discussion about whether or not it should be involved in the pulpit. Totally fine. That is a legitimate thing. The issue is that there was no response to it. And the reason that the lack of response is problematic is that when John MacArthur continues to hold church in the midst of the pandemic, people are always talking about it. Like, it was a massive uproar over it, and yet the Dallas Statement was given no attention. So that is something that I think is problematic, and I'm thankful to Voddie for pointing it out. Other than that, great academic sourcing on that section. Like I said, this isn't a super academic section, so it's not as carefully, it doesn't need to be as carefully cited as some of the other portions of the book need to be. He does give a lot of really good information in this chapter. So kind of towards the end of the chapter, which is pages 139 through, well, this is the bulk of the chapter, actually. The bulk of the chapter is dealing with some of the issues within the Southern Baptist Convention, which is an affiliation of over 40,000 churches. And so there is something that passed in 2019 that is very interesting. The original resolution, it's called Resolution 9. It was passed in the 2019 convention. Resolution 9 was originally penned in language that was very similar to the Dallas Statement. However, what was passed had been heavily modified in support of CRT and to a certain extent critical social justice. I do want to make a point. It is at this point in evangelicalism that we start to see a lack of clarity between critical social justice and CRT. Resolution 9 is kind of the domino that I'm seeing as I'm reading fault lines and kind of looking at other things. Resolution 9 in 2019 was the starting point for the confusion and the hysteria, because what happened is people were pushing back against critical social justice without calling it critical social justice, and then other people rewrote the resolution to kind of use the vocabulary in a way to pivot away from the worldview of critical social justice and pushing back against it, to trying to be positive towards the adaptation and adoption of critical race theory, which is a byproduct of the critical social justice worldview. So Resolution 9 is a major domino and major aspect of what's been going on. And so I was really, really thankful for the clarity and just the really strong, clear communication that Voddie did on this piece. There was some political maneuvering that I'm not going to get into. This is just the 2019 convention had a lot of things happen that just weren't appropriate. They weren't good Christian ethical decisions. And so for that, I'm going to kind of address my own perspective here, just so everybody is aware. When I think about ethics, I think about ethics from a deontological perspective, in that I don't look at the end result. I look at the action for how I live my life. Does it honor God? Is it honest? Does it fit the bill of the qualities in Scripture that are the fruits of the Spirit? Do they match the type of character that we see in the fruits of the Spirit, in the life of Christ, in the Sermon on the Mount? Is it contributing to my and others' growth in the qualities given in 2 Peter 1, 5 through 9? All of those pieces of information are part of what I would consider to be my ethical perspective, where I do what I can to ensure that I'm not going contrary to those elements of life. I fail at this every day, but I try. And so to me, the political maneuvering that happened in 2019 is a gross breach by President J.D. Greear of Christian ethics. I think he was very much out of alignment with the behavior of a good Christian soldier in 2019. I'm not saying anything about his faith. I'm saying that this one action was something that was in breach of Christian character. And so I not really resolution for it, not really a reason to hash it with him. Just, I think that was a breach of Christian ethics. And as a result, we have issues that we're having to deal with. The issues that we're having to deal with do not have any influence on whether or not his behavior was appropriate or not, in my eyes. They're just consequences of the decision that was made. And so Voddie kind of gives some of the differences between the original resolution, the final resolution. You can read those on your own time. Seriously, you need to be reading this book. I am not enough. Listening to Voddie talk about the book is not enough. You need to read the book for yourselves. So that's that. And so this is just getting into more stuff on resolution. He spends a lot of time on resolution 9. This is a very well put together chapter. I think the only thing that I will say is this really bothers me when he does this. Critical race theory is not a worldview. He says this at the beginning. Critical social justice is the worldview. Critical race theory is the byproduct. This is so frustrating for me. So in pages 144, he gets back into this CRT is a worldview language. That's not in alignment with what he's done in the rest of the book. So frustrating to me. But setting that aside, y'all have heard me talk till I'm blue in the face about that in previous episodes. This chapter covers a lot of ground a second time, which is why you're not really hearing me get into a whole bunch of stuff. It's just, yeah. He goes, yeah, this is just it's a bit of a repeat chapter for a lot of information. With that being said, yeah. Resolution 9, massively important. And it was kind of the first domino. That's the biggest piece for me, kind of academically analyzing it, was 1, this chapter was very well put together. 2, repeats of information. 3, really just Resolution 9 being passed in 2019, such a massive component of what's going on. Like, I can't even really get into all of the repercussions of it, really. So, to kind of give a picture. So, Resolution 9 is kind of what caused the fault line in my eyes. It's what caused the deep entrenchment because of the political maneuvering that happened with Resolution 9. I think that in a lot of ways, what happened with Resolution 9, how it was changed, why it was changed, it doesn't conform to Christian character, and because such a high level action was not in conformance to Christian character, we had a damage to the body. And so I'm gonna spend just a minute or two on this. One of the largest elements that we need to be aware of if we're in leadership or if we have influence in Christian circles is that when we behave in ways that break the character of Christ, we are, unfortunately, causing significant damage to the body of Christ. Because our mistakes have impact on those we influence. A fault line that is growing, that has been kind of slowly building, pastoral accountability. The mistakes of pastors cannot be defended. There is grace for them as people, as humans, as bearers of the Imago Dei. But their behaviors cannot be excused. Pastoral accountability is a fault line that is growing ever more divisive. The situation with the Zacharias scandal and others. One, if you pay attention to the blog, I dealt with the issues of Donatism in response to controversy. That's something you can look at the blog for. I'm not going to get into that here. I'm not here for that. But I think another fault line that is emerging is coming from the pastoral accountability discussions. That may be something that I have a roundtable discussion on the podcast for in a later date. That being said, consider supporting on Patreon. Consider sharing the episodes. Guys, if you think this information is helping you, it can probably help somebody else. So pass it along. A verse that's super huge in CBMC, Christian Businessman's Connection, is 2 Timothy 2:2, especially here in DFW. And it's this idea of take what you have heard. This is Paul speaking, writing to Timothy. Take what you have heard from me and entrust it to faithful men who can teach others also. So when I'm putting out this stuff on the podcast, I'm entrusting the things that I have heard from the people who are pouring into my life and the things that I am learning from books and things like that. And I am entrusting it to you, the listeners, so that you can pass it along to faithful individuals who can teach others also. I don't care if you share I don't care if you share the immediate episode. I don't care if you share what's happening on the screen. What I care about is if you're having conversations, if you think it's productive. If you think what's happening in the podcast is productive, what I'm hoping and praying is that you're carrying those conversations into your conversations with people. And so I'll leave with that. This has been the In Step with God podcast. I am your host, JT Martin, and we will see you next time.